little strange. Sorry we can't see everyone, and sorry you can't see us. But I guess that's the connection between Rome and London today.
Yes.
We'll be fairly quick. I can say that the reason that Gwyn and I have written this article and involved in this process is that we're the co-chairs of this subgroup of the IASC on accountability to affected populations. And that probably doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people, but within the humanitarian community at least, the ISC is sort of the central body that brings all the humanitarian agencies together. So it's quite a central role for organizations such as the UN and NGOs. So within the ISC, we've been tasked with pulling together some work on accountability to affected populations, and that started out with a discussion amongst the principals of the organizations involved. For instance, UNHCR, WFP on my side, FAO on Gwyn's side, UNICEF, Interaction, representing NGOs, and a large group of other organizations. And so the principals met early in the year, and they decided that there needed to be a greater commitment towards accountability by the agencies. And it was quite a broad commitment at that stage. But they turned around and asked us to start working on trying to give that more meaning and trying to actually bring it to the field level and try to define what it means in practical terms. So our subgroup was brought together around that. And essentially what we've tried to do is we've tried to bring together the practitioners, as it were, of accountability in the field to learn what they've been doing and to find out what tools already exist, and then to try to orientate our work around building off of that, or at least serving as a central point where we could give that some focus and some common platform to present to the agencies. And that work has built off of what the ECB project has done, that's built off of HAP and Sphere work, CDAC, and other agencies that have been working on it, plus our own agencies and what they've been doing on accountability as well. And so that brought us to a workshop early in July this year where we put together what we call a common operational framework. And this common operational framework is trying to spell out in the program phases of operations, i.e. from when you really start just to plan, to when you go out and assess needs, to when you actually design projects and how you implement those projects, and eventually, obviously, until you monitor and evaluate how those projects are performing. And what we tried to do is to look at all the tools and mechanisms that are out there and the good practices that are out there and try to associate them with the different program stages, or in some cases, things that carry on throughout the program cycle. And it's supposed to be a very practical tool. It should be something that somebody can go out, they can pick up and essentially use as a checklist. And so that's been an ongoing piece of work for us. And in the broader terms, what we've been looking at are commitments, and commitments from the agencies, from the humanitarian agencies, at a very high level to accountability, to make sure that this work then gets translated into policy and into operational plans and programmatic instructions and these sort of things to really make the accountability issue central to what's going on. And those commitments are based on some work that ECB has done that try to sort out different issues that need to be really drawn attention to, and that's leadership, transparency, feedback and complaints mechanisms, participation, and design monitoring and evaluation. So these commitments have been, and Gwyn will get into this in a little bit, have been endorsed by the IASC at the working group level, and we're hoping will eventually be endorsed by the principals later this year when they meet. This whole process that we've been involved with has really been a dialogue amongst everybody involved, and we've tried to be as inclusive as possible. It hasn't been exclusive at all, and we've brought in others that aren't necessarily part of the ISC, but who do have good experience. And we've come to a point where we feel that we've got a decent handle on the issue, but there are some outstanding issues that remain that we need guidance on, and we need to have a closer look. And I'll turn over to Gwyn then to maybe go over a few of those issues.
Thanks, Brian. So I'm just going to talk about some of the new challenge, or the challenges that we've identified that we haven't yet addressed, and also to look at how we're going to move forward. So central to the commitments that Brian was talking about is the need to communicate with communities, and this is central to the accountability operational framework. And as part of that, we've talked a lot about feedback and complaints mechanisms. As part of our work, we've put forward some ideas about what feedback and complaints mechanisms would be, and obviously with every context or every different environment, you have to tailor your feedback and complaints mechanism to that environment. But there are challenges to that, in the sense that in order to be able to ensure that accountability is mutually reinforcing, that it's built around partnership, that it is credible, those feedback and complaints mechanisms need to be taken seriously and understood by all of the organizations involved in a common framework. Meaning that if there is feedback and it's not acted upon, or if there's a complaint and it's not acted upon, it means that could somehow jeopardize the operations of the entire humanitarian community rather than one individual organization. So there are, and that's an extreme example, but there are challenges around that we feel we haven't quite fully come to terms with. And as part of that work, that was one of our key recommendations, is to pilot this accountability framework in the field. And we're working with ECB and HAP International, the clusters, to look at how we can pilot this operational framework. And we're looking at Ethiopia and Horn of Africa at the moment to see how we can work together through a common mechanism. And there have been good examples, but they've been very constrained. In Dadaab camp, for example, there was a very good mechanism established, but obviously that's a very particular environment. The other question that we had is about communications. There's a lot of innovative technology out there. There's a lot of communication tools that are being used in the major responses over the last couple of years. The use of mobile phones, the use of different communication tools, and capitalizing on those, keeping up to date with information technologies is a real challenge when we're looking at accountability, because to be accountable to affected populations means being able to communicate as efficiently as possible, to understand what people are communicating to us. So that's another area that we need to strengthen in terms of the accountability framework. The other element I wanted to also talk about, because this was taken very much on board by the IAC working group when they met a couple of weeks ago, which is a need for programming to be flexible. In order to adapt programming, there needs to be flexible in how we implement our programs, and there needs to be flexibility in terms of how those programs are funded, so that we can adapt programming according to what has been agreed or decided. So a dialogue with donors at a very high level has been suggested and will be discussed by the IAC principals at the end of the year, to look at if we can come up with a common framework, not only for the practitioners or the operational agencies or organizations, but also with donors, because there is a recognition by donors, DFID particularly ECHO, that accountability is something that we need to be more systematically building into our programming, but not necessarily a common understanding of how that would work or what that would mean. So I'm going to stop there and hand it back to you, Wendy. Thanks.